Welcome back to the interpretation of dreams. Now, we've been moving at a breakneck pace, and I have to tell you that has been deliberate. It was never my intention to take cartoons to provide a comprehensive explanation of this book. Rather, my intention was to take cartoons and to have some fun and to provide an accessible, basic introduction to the book. Now, at this point, I think a brief review is necessary. Freud begins the book by explaining different schools of dream interpretation, and then he tells us about his own method. Now, Freud's method is based on respecting the individuality of the dreamer. It's based on taking a dream and breaking it down into smaller parts, and then asking the dreamer what associations come to mind when they think of those individual parts. He provides one of his own dreams, Irma's injection, as an example of his method. He then tells us what he believes dreams are. Dreams, he says, are fundamentally expressions of wishes. In some dreams, the wish is obvious. In other dreams, the wish is not so obvious, but he insists the wish is still there, it's just been disguised. And why would a wish be disguised? The answer is that some wishes, if explicitly expressed in our dreams, would cause the dreamer distress. And so we have what seems like this internal censor which prevents some wishes from being expressed. But the dream-making part of our unconscious still wants to get the wish across, so that dream-making part disguises the wish. So now, with that review out of the way, buckle up your seatbelts and let's get ready for Chapter 6. Freud begins Chapter 6 by giving us some new terminology. There is a dream's manifest content and a dream's latent content. A dream's manifest content is what the dream appears to be about. Its latent content is what it is actually about. So let's go back to the dream in which Freud had the thought, R is my uncle. The dream's manifest content was Freud's uncle and R. The dream's latent content was much deeper and much more complicated. It was about anti-Semitism and a university professorship and Freud's own ambition. Freud tells us that a dream's manifest content and latent content are the same story but in different languages, and our job is to translate the dream's manifest content. Once we understand the latent content, we know what the dream is really about. He goes on to tell us how dreams are constructed. As he sees it, there are 4 factors involved in the construction of a dream. Now, Freud wants to understand this not for theoretical reasons, but for practical reasons. If we understand how a dream is constructed, then we have a better chance at translating it. The first factor is condensation. To condense something is to compress it. You're not taking anything away, you're just cramming it together. I think of a suitcase in which the entirety of one's wardrobe is crammed into the suitcase. I think condensation occurs in almost every dream. We've seen several examples of this already. In the dream of the botanical monograph, for example, the dream itself was very short. It could have been written down in a very small paragraph, but the dream itself was crammed full of different associations, and to write out these associations would have taken several pages. We saw another example of condensation in Irma's injection. Here, 2 people in Freud's life were condensed. Dr. M looked kind of like Dr. M, but also kind of like Freud's brother, and Freud concluded that the figure in the dream was meant to represent both Dr. M and Freud's brother. Freud tells us that names can also be condensed. He had a dream in which the word norectal appeared. Now, norectal isn't an actual word. Freud then interpreted the dream, and he had a number of associations, some of them leading to 2 Ibsen characters, one named Nora and one named Ekdal. The second factor involved in the construction of a dream is displacement. To displace something means to replace one thing with another. This happens in dreams all the time. Just the other day, I had a dream about a bald man. Well, I know this bald man in real life, but when I went to interpret the dream, it became clear that the dream probably wasn't about the bald man, but it was about my dad. The bald man was a stand-in for my dad. Now, one thing that interests Freud is how significant ideas can be displaced by seemingly unimportant dream elements. We see an example of this in the botanical monograph. Here, these important ideas are displaced by a plant and by a monograph. The third factor of dream construction is symbolism. Now, symbolism is really just a type of displacement. In displacement, one element replaces another. In symbolism, one element replaces an abstract idea, or one element is used to represent an abstract idea. Now, symbolism, Freud says, occurs all the time in dreams, and let me give just a few examples. A female patient had a dream in which all the people around her were especially big. Translation, the dream is about her childhood, a time in which adults were bigger than her. A man dreamt of his uncle giving him a kiss in an automobile. Translation, the dream was about autoeroticism. A man dreamt it was 5:15 in the morning. Translation, the dream was calling his attention to the time when he was 5 years and 3 months old. A woman had a dream in which she encountered several lions, and yet she wasn't afraid of the lions. Translation, the dream really wasn't about lions, but about people in her life. For example, her English mistress, Miss Lyons, and her father, a man who wore a beard that framed his face like a mane. The fourth factor is what Freud calls secondary revision. Now, Freud thinks the censor is responsible for secondary revision. Now, remember, the dream maker will make the dream in such a way as to elude the censor. Well, sometimes Freud thinks the censor says, no, let me have another look. And the censor will add things to the dream to make the dream more intelligible, to make the dream less absurd. Now, Freud believes that the unconscious is this chaotic place, a place where laws of logic do not hold. Now, it's like the dream maker is this avant-garde filmmaker, and he wants to make this radical dream, this profoundly true dream. And the censor is sort of like the studio and says, I think we need to make it a little more family friendly. Yeah, like there's this crazy gap in this dream, or this kind of doesn't make sense. Let's make it a little more sensible. So something like this seems to happen, and Freud says sometimes dreams are really crazy and they make very little sense, and sometimes dreams, well, they make a little more sense. They resemble daydreams, and he thinks in these dreams, secondary revision has been done. Well, that's all I have for today. Take care, and I will see you next time. Shalom.